One, action. Hello, Celeste Cuffie here. Welcome to the Life Empowered Living Room. I am so glad to be here with you today, and I'm even more excited about our very special guest. President and CEO is me of Life Empowered Consulting Service, but I want to also introduce the Chief Information Security Officer of American Family Insurance, Sheldon Cuffie. Hi, Sheldon.
Hey, good afternoon.
How are you
I'm
today?
doing well, thank you.
Now tell the wonderful audience what we have in common.
We happen to be married.
Very
We
coincidentally.
also have kids in common. Yes.
Well, I am so glad that you are able to join me today in Life Empowered's living room. And I am excited to hear your voice, your opinion, your thoughts, and how that's going to continue to help everyone listening to this podcast live life empowered. So I like to start with some quick questions. I call them 5 7, fast 7, sometimes quick 5,
Mm.
whatever. But I'm interested in learning some fun things about you. What's your favorite cereal?
Frosted Flakes.
Too. Very interesting. What's your favorite cartoon?
The Flintstones, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Tell me more.
Uh, you got Fred, Barney, dinosaurs. Folks pedaling cars with their feet. It's kind of a cool thing.
That might explain the low profile vehicles that you enjoy.
No, no, I feel judged right now.
This is still a safe place. I apologize. I apologize. Favorite subject in school?
Well, for a while, I only to annoy my father, I told him gym, but actually math. So,
Okay, I think that that makes sense. I could see that. Now, let me ask you this last question. Tell me something about you most people don't know.
mm. um, let's see. I think most people see me in my day job and the seriousness of cybersecurity, but I have a pretty interesting sense of humor and love all kinds of music, and so yeah, those two things.
Yes, I could see definitely both of those things. But now tell me about your cybersecurity journey. How did you get there?
I like to say that folks have asked me that, and I'm like, I didn't choose cyber; it chose me. And so, as the story goes, so I enlisted in the Wisconsin Army National Guard when I was 17 years old, and went into telecommunications school. And as a part of that, we were talking about electronic warfare and cryptography and radio jamming back then. And it turns out that was the precursor for a lot of the cybersecurity stuff that's going on today. So you go through a whole IT career, learn about networks and servers and data centers and all this stuff, and telecommunications around the world, and then uh, we now know that a lot of that stuff that was created over the years is inherently flawed and wasn't designed to be resilient. So you put those two things together, and you have a cybersecurity career.
Okay. So now tell me this. You have a cybersecurity career, but knowing what you know now, doing all the things that you've done up until this date, if you could go back and do it again,
Mm.
would you?
I would actually.
Okay.
And so, what I've learned as a technology professional over almost 30 years now, technology is always evolving, it's growing, it's changing. So every 2 to 3 years, I was retraining, relearning, just endlessly curious about all kinds of things as it relates to technology. And then the applications in our life, in our business, in our businesses, governments, you name it. And so that part has been really interesting to see the same technology deployed in different ways in service of these different personas.
So now you talked about the integration of technology and all of these different industries. Tell me about how you've been able to integrate your life into all of the things, right? So, husband, father, military, cybersecurity,
Yeah,
all of these roles. How have you been able to integrate successfully?
yeah.
Or do you even feel like you've been a success?
I would say relatively successful. Depends on what your standard is, but I think I've done well in terms of, and maybe not when I was younger,
Hmm.
in terms of work-life balance, because you're really just you're trying to make it, you're
Hmm.
trying to get somewhere, you're trying to constantly test yourself and figure out like how far can I go, how good can I be, and right, that can run into a collision with what your family needs, what your children need. And so we all go through that curve of adjusting and learning. And so obviously as our kids were growing up, one of the rules I had, especially for my son, was that I would not miss one soccer game. And I did miss only one soccer game for a really good reason. But for the most part, over 10 years, I made every game, every tournament, every weekend without failure. So there's things like that that I'm really proud of, that I was able to grow as a professional,
Hmm.
um, support the ministry, and also ensure that our kids were being raised the way that we wanted them to.
Okay. Now, let me ask you this because you kind of said this on the front end here, depending on how you define success. How do you define success?
Mm. I think that's really an individual matter for everyone.
Hmm.
It's a personal matter in terms of what you want to be when you grow up, and did you hit that mark for yourself? And so I have had all of these crazy ideas and goals over the years. Like there's like one regret I have, but for the most part, I did everything that I set out to and exceeded that. And so, by my own personal standard, I feel like, yeah, I did really well, and continuing to grow and continuing to lean into new things, and figure out what the future looks like even from here.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's a personal matter, and I think everybody has their own standard of what that means.
Yeah. What does it mean for you, though?
Well, what it means for me is, have I met the goals that I set out for myself, for my family, for my community? And so uh, it almost becomes a checklist
Hmm.
of, these are the things that I set out to accomplish. These are the things that I wanted to ensure other people
Hmm.
were also being brought along. Check. I wanted to make sure that we're supporting our church and supporting our community. Check. You just start to go through those, go through that list of things, and maybe more importantly, are the outcomes being delivered through that
Hmm.
you're not just checking the box, but people are seeing value by through your contributions.
Hmm. I like that. So now you mentioned checklists. So I think about, I live by checklists, to do lists daily. And so if you go through your checklist, and let's just say you have 10 things on your list, but you only get through seven,
Hmm.
then are you a failure?
No.
How do you define failure?
Well, I'll go back to your first question though. The way my life is set up, yes, I'm constantly making checklists, and I'm constantly just because of how busy you can be
Hmm.
between work, life, everything, trying to take care of yourself for that matter. So one week I just wrote down everything I needed to follow up on, and I had 33 tasks to follow up on. And that was the moment where I thought, okay, I don't feel so bad. I am just a very busy person, and I have to be okay with that. But I also have to constantly reorder
Hmm.
that checklist. And sometimes, by the time I get through working all the high priority and urgent things, the low items they just never get done, which is okay, because that tells me that those things weren't that critical,
Hmm.
and it just the natural prioritization takes care of itself.
I like that. I like that so much. And so, as you are thinking about, I mean, you've talked, you've given us a mouthful already, but as you are working today, thinking about tomorrow, reflecting on yesterday, how are you navigating what is your decision making process on defining and determining what's high priority, what's low, what's next? How are you figuring that out?
Yeah, if I could bottle that up and sell it, I'd be a billionaire. Like
We would
that's
be a billionaire. Good
yeah, yeah,
answer.
yeah.
Uh huh. Carry on.
um oh yeah, I didn't mean to leave you out there. But that's I wish, and as somebody that loves math and science and patterns and formulas and all that good stuff, there is no formula for that. It's very much a creative process that takes time, it takes effort, it takes even some trying and learning and adjusting to find out, oh yeah, I kind of dabbled in that, but that's not really what I thought it was. Okay, let's course correct immediately before I burn a bunch of time on that thing. And so yeah, it's just I think of it as a creative process, and that helps me not be frustrated about. I said I was doing this thing. I put it on a list, and I need to complete it
Hmm.
because that's how I was taught from my dad, from the military. And so there are these things that you have to unlearn. It
Hmm.
doesn't apply in every situation. And so there are these times where it's like a light switch.
Hmm.
You say, okay, I'm going from analytical to creative right now. Sometimes I need both, but this is going to be more messy and ambiguous, and I need to be comfortable with that, and I need to just work through it. And whatever time it takes, it
That's what it
takes.
takes.
And I have to be okay with that.
So I'm thinking about as you are navigating the creative and the analytical spaces, the ambiguity,
Mhm.
and then I'm thinking about your career, just the trajectory of your career. What's been some of the most difficult times in your career? What was happening? Was it analytical? Was it creative? Was it the ambiguity? Was it the both? All of the above?
Um, I think the probably the more difficult times in my career were when I was just starting out. Uh, I remember when I first became the manager of an architecture team. And so you're trying to map across the business areas what needs to be done. Do I have the resources to do this properly? What are the business objectives? And it becomes like a maze really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to have some kind of tool or structured method or an approach to just be able to sort through all of that. So I got really good at what's called mind mapping, so that I can visualize the problem, but also be clear on what the opportunity is. So I think those are when you're doing a lot of startup type activity,
Mm-hmm.
and I mapped every job I've ever done at one point, and realized that I was working on pretty much startup and turnarounds.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Very few realignments, and then not as much from a sustaining success standpoint. So that STARS model comes from a book called The First 90 Days. And so whenever I take a new position, I reread the
Mm-hmm.
first chapter of that book so that I can orient myself to, oh, okay, this is that type of situation, and these are the tools that I bring. Um, and those are difficult times, and I keep signing myself up for those types of moments. But I think that's where I thrive, and in the stress, but also,
Mm-hmm.
that can be tough at the same time.
So, I'm listening to you talk about your career, and as you're talking about your career, I'm kind of thinking about and reflecting on mine. And as I'm thinking about my own career, I'm just thinking about all of the, I call it adventure, right, in the workplace, all of the tops and turns, and just the minutia, as
Yeah.
well as the big picture stuff that you have to successfully navigate. Knowing what you know now, what would you tell that brand new, fresh out of college um, person coming into organizations trying to navigate?
Well, coming out of college, I would say it's really about learning and orienting yourself to understanding, one, who you are, and then where can you provide that value. And a lot of times we end up in these situations where we're trying to apply who we are from a value standpoint in places where it doesn't match. And so, and being okay with that, and then pivoting appropriately.
And let me jump in right here because you said something really powerful about understanding or learning who you are. Uh, Tell me what that journey, understanding who you are, Um, how was that for you?
Mm. That is going to take longer than an hour podcast. But um, early career, I was very focused on technical stuff and doing things and building things. And I used to travel around the country, and you had a very specific task and you complete it and you go to the next thing. And so I was more so learning about things and tasks, but not really learning about me.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until into my early 30s that I tapped into appropriately to understand, like, okay, how do I handle certain
Mm-hmm.
situations? What are my stress responses in certain situations? How do I negotiate?
Mm-hmm.
And so my experience with negotiating was when you go to the car dealer, you win at all costs
Mm-hmm.
and they lose.
Mm-hmm.
And I brought that mindset into corporate America,
Did it work?
and that doesn't work.
Okay.
It can work, but we actually want more of a win-win negotiation, because
Mm-hmm.
the definition of compromise is that we both don't get what we want, but we're both in a good
Ahead or
place.
better.
We both feel like we accomplished something, we both achieved something, and I didn't have to run over you to get it. And so that's where adjusting those mindsets, really understanding who you are and
Mm-hmm.
how you show up is pretty important.
Now let's take that to the next level, right? So first we talked about learning about things,
Mm,
then we talked about learning about you. Now let's talk about leadership.
mm.
How do you use those skills so that you can effectively lead others? What's tell me a story about a horrible leader that you've had. Let's make it fun.
Oh, all right. We won't name any names.
No names, no names.
Uh, let's see. I don't. I've. I'll say. I'll start with this. I've been fortunate to have a lot of amazing
Mm-hmm.
leaders. Honestly, you definitely remember the one or two,
Mm-hmm.
horrible ones,
Mm-hmm.
if we're going to use that word. But
And we'll call them not so amazing.
not yeah,
So amazing and not so amazing.
yeah. I had a leader that, uh, in hindsight, I really respect and appreciate and understand now.
Okay.
In the moment, he was so different from me that I thought this individual was crazy. He was just giving me constant feedback about, um, language and approaches, and I really, in the moment, took it personal and completely the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
And but I think as I've gotten older, I can see that he was trying to infuse in me a couple of things that I needed to be
Mm-hmm.
successful for the future.
Mm-hmm.
I had another leader that, um, frankly, told me that I would never be promoted in the company, that there were other people that would get the job before I would. And this was during a development planning meeting where, like, the company has this process
Mm-hmm.
to figure out who their talent is, match it up with skills, and yeah, I think in 5 years I want to be a director, and maybe 5 years after that I could be a VP. And I don't think I was writing down anything outrageous, but this person really, wanted me to know that, uh, for the most part, I wouldn't be anything of significance, at least not in his world. So,
Mm-hmm.
those are horrible. That's a horrible leader.
Yeah.
Somebody that wants to step on you and keep you where you are, and maybe even push you down further.
Yeah, I posted earlier this week. Don't be the leader that people are quitting their
Hmm.
jobs because of.
Right.
You always hear the saying that people they don't quit their companies, they quit their managers or they quit their leaders.
Absolutely.
And so I wanted to hear
Yeah.
the examples of what not to do. Right.
Well, yeah, and well, and the irony is, and I've been fortunate to work for some amazing companies,
Mm-hmm.
like national brands, really interesting, missions and visions for these folks and how they engage with society. But companies are made up of people, and people are inherently flawed,
Mm-hmm.
and we're all learning day by day, and uh, Yeah, that, that's
That's all I got.
that's all I got.
I love that. So now let's shift because you obviously have had a very successful career, and dare I say, you've also have a very successful marriage. But what are some things that you've done to make sure that your family feels like their priority, just like work and that career aspect of your life also was a priority for you?
Yeah. I think the sometimes we get our priorities out of order and we think about uh we tend to connect ourselves to work as our identity.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know when the moment was, but I had this I became aware that my identity was not my
Your job.
work
Mm-hmm.
or who I worked for or where I worked, because those are temporary spaces for the most part, especially in technology. Uh, Sometimes you can make it 3 years in technology in one place. I was fortunate to be in one place for 13 years, but uh, that's not really that normal anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So those are temporary spaces.
Mm-hmm.
Your family has more permanence to that.
Mm-hmm.
Your family name, your legacy, your lineage, and so there was this moment where I thought, okay, um, the reflection of me has to be my family. And if that's not the case, then yeah, I'm not so successful, am I? So that's how I thought about that.
And so, what do you tell young couples,
Mm,
right? Because we're talking about life empowered, and we're in the living room, and so we're not talking about just the work side
right.
or the work part of life, but all of the other things where we're trying to build our communities, we're trying to have successful marriages or relationships. We're also trying to raise productive and positive children. How? What are some things that you've done intentionally to make sure that you're touching all of those facets and nothing has dropped um, below the line as you are pursuing one thing or the other?
Yeah, well, I'll start with the end of that. I don't know that you can make sure nothing drops. I'm
Okay.
just going to start with that. And I think that's a reality of um, expectations and capacity
Mm-hmm.
as a married couple to try to not only take care of your family but also serve the other audiences that you have. Maybe you have uh, family members that you're caring for, you have community things that you're doing, etc. But within reason, right? If you can try to calibrate everything, that's ideal. I think of it like we're continually investing in something.
Mm-hmm.
And so like you and I were investing very heavily in our kids. And so every Saturday we were taking, the one kid to different engineering camps and the other kid loved theater and dance. And so, she was doing that and so we were putting the time where we felt it was of most value. And there were people that disagreed with,
Mm-hmm.
where we put our time,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't get to decide, we do.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes it's also being okay with um, it's not a tough decision for you, but it's tough for you to tell somebody else no because, hey, I'm doing this and this is really
Mm-hmm.
important.
Mm-hmm.
And so investing, being, it's just like like an investment portfolio. Like, what do I want to invest in? What are my values? What are my beliefs? Where do I want to put the time and effort? And especially as a young couple, there's also that understanding of we're in a building and growing phase,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, it's going to be tough
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that first 5, 10 years.
Yeah.
But knowing that we're the team,
Mm-hmm.
but also still trying to carve out time to keep that spark strong.
Yeah, I think you have a great perspective where you have these frameworks to help you navigate through where we are, right? So
Hmm.
you think about in the workplace, you have a new team and they're forming, they're storming, they're
Yep.
norming, and then they're adjourning. And so I wonder if most families take some of those principles and those frameworks and use them
Right.
within their homes so that they can say, okay, this is going to be a different time
Right.
because This is when we have a toddler and a newborn in the house. So going in understanding what it looks like and what it will be also helps mitigate some of the stress, right?
Yeah.
And so, and one of the other things I often think about that we've done very well is that we try to communicate, even when it's difficult communication, right? We we believe that we are one team, and we will have very difficult, when necessary,
Hmm.
conversations. Whereas others may shut down, others may walk away, others may separate, thinking that that's going to solve it, but they've
Right.
never actually dealt with the issue. uh, what if we did that at work? What would that look like, right? You know, and so I'm thinking about the ability to work to sustain over here, work to sustain over here, and then also understand that sometimes things will drop. How do you, and I know that you have very high standards for yourself.
Yeah.
And so my question is, how do you deal with forgiveness, either for you or for other people, or even your partner, when the ball drops?
I think forgiveness forgiveness is easy when you understand someone's intent.
Mm,
So if I understand that uh, you have my back, you understand what I'm trying to do, I understand what you're trying to do. And yeah, we're going to trip over stuff. You're going to say the wrong thing. You're going to, not prioritize something
mm-hmm,
appropriately. That stuff is definitely going to happen, and that's
mm-hmm,
just a function of life. I think it's so that's easier.
mm-hmm,
I think it's harder when, and going back to what you said is, you choose who your mate and your fam. Sometimes, well, maybe you don't always choose who your family is, but you choose who you marry, and but you don't get to choose who you work with many
mm-hmm,
times, even though, okay, I interviewed for the job, I accepted the job, but things
mm-hmm,
aren't always as they seem, or everybody comes from different places, and so trying to connect the dots on that, and then that goes back to what we were talking about earlier is, okay, who am I?
mm-hmm.
How do I bring value into this environment, this situation? And how do I help make other people around me better? And how do I let them help me be better?
Mm.
Uh, right? It
Let's talk about
so it
that.
goes both ways.
How do you do with letting others help you?
Um, well, it depends. So
Tell
from
me more.
yeah, so I'm a very independent person.
Mm-hmm.
I had to be growing up because if I didn't do it, there wasn't anybody to backstop me, save my butt, nothing. Like either I did it or it didn't get done. And so a lot of time, especially as I was advancing in my career, then I became an executive, and then it's like, I had the moments where I was like, oh, okay, oh, I need an assistant.
Mm-hmm.
And the first assistant I had, she'll probably hear this and she'll kind of laugh at this, but she was like, "Well, you know, uh, have you worked with an assistant before?" I'm like, "No, not really. I take care of myself." And she's like, "Well, okay, good to know. Um, do you think you'd be able to let go of doing some of those things?"
Mm.
And that was the moment where I was like, "I don't
No. Did you say
know."
no?
I said, "I don't know, but I'm willing to figure it out."
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And she helped me figure it out.
mm-hmm.
So, that you have those experiences along the way.
I love that so much. I love that so much. And you said something powerful. One of the things I love, one of my distant mentors often says, "What are you willing to give up to go up?" So,
Yep.
can you talk about some of the sacrifices you felt like you made on your journey, and not just career wise, but just on this journey of life? Some of the
Hmm.
ebbs and flows, some of the things that you feel like you've had to not do.
Um, well, going back to the assistant story, uh, the assistant becomes an extension of you.
Mhm.
Like they are you in some
Mhm.
cases, uh, and and then my second assistant, could kind of look around corners and kind of think ahead for me in some cases, and then say, hey, here's what happened, and here's what I think we should do, A or B. And I think you should do A. And I'm like, yeah, I think that's what I do.
Good
And
answer.
right, good answer. I was like, oh, that's great. I didn't have to do anything. And so like you need to be able to let go of things so that you can strategically focus on bigger rocks because you have people that are, their careers, their
Mhm.
families are in your hands, and you have to think about it that way. Like you're not just running a thing, you're managing. I had 450 people at one point,
Mhm.
and if I screwed up the budget, guess what?
Mhm.
I don't have 450 people. I have to let some of them go. That impacts their kids, all of
Mhm.
that stuff. And so you have to really be able to zoom out and let go of
Mhm.
things that other people can help you with.
So I love this because we have a really good story here. We started with learning the things,
Hmm.
then we moved to learning about you. Then we talked about you just in this last kind of segment about leadership and the impact of your role as a leader and the decisions that you make. Now, let me take it one level higher and say, who do you go to
Mm,
for support and mentorship and guidance?
yeah.
Who does the who feeds the what's the word? Who helps the doctors? Who serves the doctors?
Yeah. Well, I happen to have an executive coach that lives with me, so that's pretty amazing. But
Wow.
no, she didn't pay me to say that, by the way. But yeah, and it's there's definitely a few people in my circle.
Mhm.
I've heard folks say, "Well, it's my personal board
Mhm.
of advisors and that kind of thing." But I actually don't like to have too many people that I'm tapping
That's
into.
so good.
I want diverse perspectives, but I need perspectives that are going to challenge me.
Mhm.
I don't want people that are just going to agree with me and say, "Oh yeah, Sheldon, yeah, everything you touch is gold," and
Mhm.
yeah, it's not you, it's them, and it's like, no, I need that person in that moment to say, uh, handle me with a little empathy and grace, but also say, yeah, so what I heard you say was this, and maybe you should think about it this
Mhm.
way, and kind of nudge you towards maybe a different solution. And so, yeah, I'm fortunate to have a few people that just are amazing. They have been mentors to me, and you know, they have no other uh,
Agenda or motive.
agenda or
Yeah.
motive just to see me thrive and grow.
Yeah, absolutely. As you were talking about that, one of the people that I thought of instantly was our pastor.
Yeah,
And so but we've not talked about faith at all.
yeah.
So can you tell me about how your faith plays into all of the things that you do?
It's really it's incredible how it plays into everything. And I'll give you a couple of examples. Uh, so if you walk through a church and you don't make contact with someone and you don't shake their hand, like they'll be kind of offended.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something I learned at a young age at church. I was an assistant to our pastor for a long time, and I just saw how the care and empathy he had for people. Uh, Even in some cases where like they didn't quite care for him, but
Mm-hmm.
he that's his job to show up in that moment and help them, help the family, be better, be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are things that I took to work.
Mm-hmm.
Like when and a lot of times I'm just like, because I was, when I was younger, when I was just doing a lot more task oriented type stuff, it's like I was in the military too. So it's just like, okay, I'm going from point A to point B as fast as I can. And,
Mm-hmm.
I'm laser focused and like, oh, hey, keep moving. And so now over the past 10, 15 years, I'm just better at slowing down and saying, oh, hey, how are you?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and not as a not as a task itself, but like genuinely like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I'm like haven't seen you in a while, and how are you doing, and how are your kids, and just keeping that Rolodex as well, because you get stuff done through people. Nothing works without people, so you should take care of your people.
I love
Uh,
that.
and and so that's one of the big, and it's such a small thing,
It's
and
critical.
it's critical. And one of my mentors told me, he said, Sheldon, you try to think about like all these things you're gonna do, and like you're gonna make this adjustment and this adjustment. It's like you're looking at yourself like a car, and you're like, oh, I need to do this, or a house, and you're gonna remodel all this stuff. And he's like, in your role at your level, they're just small adjustments you
Hmm.
need to make,
Hmm.
but they look this big to everybody else.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I was like, oh my God,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah. I told someone earlier today, as a matter of fact, I said, all you have to do, said they need the potatoes. The only thing I'm asking you to do is just put a little bit of butter
Yeah,
or a little bit of gravy on it just to make
absolutely.
it a little bit more digestible for the audience. And sometimes that's, as leaders, what we need to do.
Absolutely.
Now, oh,
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead.
I just wanted to give you that second example, um, in terms of, ministry and how that plays into the workplace. And so a lot of times we end up with employees that are having performance issues. And so, and a lot of people like me, very task oriented, results oriented, like deliver the outcome. That's what you're here
That's
for.
your job. Do your
That's your
job.
job. We all get paid. Like, we've got goals that everybody's got a boss, and, I don't want my boss coming for me because,
You're not
somebody
doing
else
what you're
didn't,
supposed to
right?
do. Yeah.
And but then you have to have that moment where you stop and ask why.
Hmm.
Like, oh, this person is normally like they're on it. They're on their job. They're, have always delivered stellar results. And then all of a sudden you see that drop off.
Hmm.
And you're like, hmm. And a lot of the leaders, because they're just caught in this cycle of managing, they end up going down the, what do we call it? Performance development,
Disciplinary.
or,
Yeah.
yeah, all of, and it's like, you could take a moment and say, hey,
Are you
Celeste,
okay?
like,
Yeah.
how are you doing?
Hmm.
How's everything with your family? And it's just like that simple question, and folks will like sometimes they'll open up and tell you like too much, but there's that moment where you're like, oh, and then they know that you see them,
Hmm.
and they know that they almost feel like they're letting you down. And so, because I've had a boss do this for me,
Hmm.
and I'm like, oh, I'm letting my boss down.
Hmm.
Okay, let me get back on the
Hmm.
saddle here and get things moving.
You just, man, I'm having such a good time talking to you, and you're triggering so many other questions.
Mm.
But I know we need to get ready to wrap up. So let me ask you this question about what you just talked about, and then I'll have a final question for you. And so here's the question: you talked about seeing your team, seeing your employees, your direct reports. As a leader, do you feel seen?
Uh, yes,
And what does that look like for you?
but
Mm-hmm.
I think as leaders, so I love this show on Netflix. It's called The Crown,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's about the Queen, and all of the lineage, and they go through the different times. And the Queen one day, Queen Elizabeth says, "Heavy is the head that wears the crown."
Mm-hmm.
And so what she was saying is that, well, no one's going to have any pity,
Right.
or
Nobody cares about you.
like
Yeah.
she's the queen, like she's got all these people taking care of her, and all that stuff. And so leadership, comes with, a level of humility. It has to. uh, we've seen enough leaders that have no humility, and so that's not what I want to, put out into the world. But you think about, um, how leaders need to show up, and their responsibilities, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes that is the leader's job, is to take the arrows, and deal with the stuff that, to kind of block and tackle for their
Mm-hmm.
team. And so, yeah, leadership is incredibly tough as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I had a gentleman that I was mentoring for a little while, and I think he stopped showing up for mentoring after I gave him this advice, but I was dead serious. And he said, I'm a project manager. if I could be a frontline manager, people would actually listen to me because they have to report to me, and I could tell them what to do. And I said, don't become a frontline manager. You as a leader, you have to lead with referent power and not formal authority.
Mm-hmm.
The president of the United States can't even lead with formal authority
Mm-hmm.
all the time. That's a command and control environment. Nobody wants to work in that environment or for that person. And so that's where, from a leadership standpoint, you have to really calibrate towards, how to just be a person,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
still get the outcomes delivered, but also know that you're gonna have some really tough days,
Mm-hmm.
some tough hours almost every day, and you have to know how to be resilient and still do your job and still take care of your people.
I love that. Okay. So when if and when there's a time as a leader you don't feel like you're seen,
Mm.
you understand that that's part of the job.
Yeah, you pick anyone, whether they're a star, an athlete, uh, or a frontline worker. I loaded trucks for 3 years, and right, that's what I had to do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I felt seen.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, we were establishing our house at that time. I felt seen by you. Uh, I felt seen by my family who said, "Wow, man, he's really getting after this. He's working overtime. Like he's got these goals and these dreams." So, but that really comes back to where we started
Mm-hmm.
at the top of the podcast in terms of, what are your goals and what do you want to be when you grow up. So, uh, being seen is maybe it's a bit of a luxury, but depending on who you are, it's an absolute requirement. So yeah,
And I would just add to that that sometimes being seen can be a blessing and a curse.
it's
So
that that'll be podcast number
is that
two.
number two?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, for sure.
that's so good. And so here's my last question for you. The whole point and premise of this podcast is really to embrace, empower, and elevate. And those are kind of the three anchors that I think Life and Power Consulting Services as a whole stands on. And that's embracing people like us or not like us, right? So
Mm,
in either perspective, our ability to really latch on and to bring people together,
yep.
very, very inclusive, to empower people, which is giving them the tools, the information, the insight that they need to really go to the next level as they see fit in their own life and in their own careers, right? So both. And then also the elevate, also being a catalyst for them to help them get to that next level. And so when you think about those three things, embracing, empowering, and elevating, where do you feel like you play the most? Where's your happy place?
Very much on the embrace side, but if I replay that backwards, you can't elevate anything without empowering the people to deliver on those outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't empower them, you can't. If you don't embrace them,
You
they're
can't
not
empower.
empowered.
Yeah.
And so, being embraced that shows up in different ways
Mm-hmm.
in terms of, hey, Celeste, I trust you. Just let me know how everything goes out.
Mm-hmm.
How everything goes, and I'm sure it'll be fine.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes embracing is just showing up and saying, development, bringing someone along
Mm-hmm.
that you see that has high potential,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll elevate themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They sometimes just need the door to be open in order to do so.
And that encouragement.
And
Yeah.
can you open that door?
Mm-hmm.
So embrace is very much, we talk about inclusive
Mm-hmm.
environments. That's really what we're talking about.
Absolutely. That's absolutely what we're talking about. And so I just want to say that I fully embrace you. I hope you feel empowered, as well as I want you to know that once folks listen to this, they will also be elevated even the further, even the more. So I want to say thank you for taking time out to meet with us, to meet with Life Empowered and sharing your time, your talent, and your treasure with us. And I want you to continue to live life empowered. And to all of my listeners, thank you again for your time and live life empowered. Take care. Goodbye.
Very cool.
All set.
Good job.
Cool.